What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Final Destination review series, and now we are on part 2, Final Destination 2. And for a very long time, this was my favorite Final Destination film. This was one that I also saw in theaters with both of my parents, actually, and had a lot of fond memories of rewatching this thing constantly back in the 2000s. I remember going out day one and buying the DVD. So this is one that, like the original, I have a lot of nostalgic love for, and I was really looking forward to revisiting because I have not seen any of these movies in quite a long time. And the premise of Final Destination 2 is very similar to the first film, where you have a girl who is going on a road trip with her friends, comes to a giant interstate, and has a horrific premonition of one of the most wild car pileups ever, and tells her premonition to everybody on the on-ramp behind her, saves the vast majority of them from this tragedy, and then death comes back for them one by one. Starting right away with the positives for Final Destination 2, the opening sequence of this film, that huge car pileup, is to date one of the greatest set pieces in horror history. I think it's easily one of the best sequences in this entire franchise. It is certainly the one to measure up against. I think that it's as extravagant as far as the first film while being even more expansive, where each individual person has some instance of a violent death within this car pileup. And this entire sequence is quite literally responsible for an entire generation of people being deathly afraid of following behind a log truck on the highway. And we have those bitches everywhere down south, so you can imagine how many times I'm changing fucking lanes. It's just an incredibly executed sequence. Like, even in action films, I don't think we've had a pileup sequence like this that's as effective as the one in Final Destination 2. So this really starts this movie off with a bang, and as I said, sets a template and sets a standard for all the sequels to come that they have to measure up against and try to up, if that's even possible. While this movie, and honestly a lot of the other sequels too, very much follow the template that is set by the first film, I do like the fact that this film gives some attempt to try to expand the lore a little bit. There's a bit of a revelation at some point that the victims of this film are somehow tied to the victims of the first film, and I thought that that was a really interesting plot device to have in there that made sense. And they try to incorporate how like death is working backwards because of that to try to tie up all the loose ends, and they have a concept about a new life is the only way to defeat death. Another little bit of wisdom that they get from Tony Todd's mystical mortician. And I just like the attempts there. It doesn't all work. I certainly don't think that, everything completely comes together. And for some, it might even convolute things a little bit. But I appreciate that they didn't just follow the exact template of the first film with a new set of characters and a new set of kills, which would be very easy to do. I like the fact that there was some attempt to expand the lore and give some additional rules to how death works in this universe. Now, the one thing that we all come to these movies for is the carnage candy, baby. And let me tell you, Final Destination 2 has some of the best kills of this franchise. And at the time when I saw it in the theater, I thought it was a wild ride. Like, it was to the point where at the time, we hadn't quite got into the Saw craze yet and some of the torture porn stuff and, the more gory films that came out in the latter part of the 2000s. And so a number of kills in this movie was some of the goriest stuff that I had seen up to that point. And I thought that there was a nice ramp up of intensity too, as far as how extravagant these individual death scenes are, where there's much more of a tease factor. There's much more of an extravagant way that the Rube Goldberg stuff works together. There's plenty of fake outs within there. There's a number of sequences where multiple characters die back to back. And so it kind of catches you off guard when you think you're going to have a moment to breathe and you don't. So the kills in this film, I definitely think are a highlight for not only being bloodier, but being a little bit more large in scale and having some really solid fake outs. The one that always stuck with me the most, the one that made me like cringe in the theater, was the one where the kid gets killed by the big, huge piece of glass. He shoos the pigeons, and then just the effect of him looking up and then immediately cutting to him getting just fucking accordioned by this giant piece of glass. Every time I watch it, it's like I feel my back hurt. Like, oh, god damn, somebody crack it. And something that was definitely a newer element that was put into this second film that I really appreciated was it does have a little bit of a dark comedy streak in here. The first film takes itself dead serious and it works very well This one has a little bit more fun with the concept. It has a bit more fun with its characters. It's got a little bit more of a tongue-in-cheek look at how gory and extravagant some of these deaths are, and some of them are kind of punchlines to a certain degree. So it's a movie that you kind of nervously have a little bit of fun with. You're laughing at certain things. You're laughing at how nervous and how tense some of these kill scenes are making you. And I just like that element. I think that that's a good formula to have for these movies, where you have the intensity, but you also have a little bit of guilty fun along the way. Moving on to the mixed aspects, it's just really the cast of characters is the big one for me, where there's some characters that I like. I think the stoner character is a lot of fun, where he's constantly messing with everybody. I think that the guy's named Eugene is really entertaining because he's such a skeptic, and then within seconds he is so bought in. The scene wherever he's talking shit and leaves the apartment and then sees somebody gets decapitated and hauls ass right back to the apartment. One of the biggest laughs of the movie. And, you know, the lead, she's okay. You know, AJ Cook is okay in this film. She's functional. I don't think she has the personality as a couple of the other leads in this franchise, but, you know, cast of characters, they're decent. I think the main issue that holds them back, where, you know, most times we don't have huge expectations for slasher style characters, is that you lose a little bit of that likable charm when they're not teenagers for some reason. These are all grown ass adults, and so they're all more realistically skeptical, but it also makes them a little bit more unlikable as well, where just every single person aside from the cop character is not buying this bullshit at all, no matter how many times it's proven in front of them. So it takes a little bit to warm up to this cast, and by the time you do, it's halfway through the film and, you know, a third of them are dead. I've also always been very mixed on how Ali Larter is used in this film. Now, she's the returning character. She's the legacy character here. So I feel like she should have gotten much more of an upgrade, much more of an important piece in this narrative than she actually did. And I just never really found the way that she's utilized to be all that effective. Like, she has a little bit more of a take charge attitude. She's certainly a lot more jaded and a lot more rough around the edges because of everything she's gone through from the first movie onward. Losing Alex, of course, we'll get into that. But you know, she's somebody that when she enters the film as a full-on side character, I feel like she should take more of a prominent role. She should almost take over the role of lead of the film, and she's just always kind of in the background. So she's there just kind of like an extension of Tony Todd. She's there to give the exposition. She's there to give all the rules to AJ Cook so that she can tell everybody else. She's a messenger. And I just feel like a legacy character should have more of a prominent function than just being a messenger of the rules of the first film. And now moving on to the negatives. And since I just brought it up, let's just go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room. The fact that Devon Sawa is not in this film is fine. I don't know whatever happened with that. I don't know if it was a pay dispute. I don't know if he was busy doing something else. I don't know if he was ever even intended to be a part of this film. You know, we have horror sequels that don't have main characters carried on, and we function just fine. But the disrespect that they show to his character in this film, and just having him be killed by a little pussy-ass falling brick, and you just get a little picture of him laying on the ground, like, that almost feels like a producer had a bone to pick with him. And they were like, all right, you don't want to be in this movie, or you want to ask for more money, or whatever the fuck the reason was? Well, fuck you and your character. This is what you get. This is your legacy now. So I've never liked that. I remember seeing that in the theater going, oh, bullshit. Like, no, fuck that. And as if that explanation is not clunky enough, there's also some incredibly clunky dialogue in this film. You know, we don't have actors that have quite the personality of the cast in the first film, and so that might be a part of it, but a lot of the dialogue here, when they're trying to express the rules or trying to give warnings to people, a lot of it, it doesn't land so well. Like, you know, even just little things like, you know, I'm sorry, what are you saying, officer? A man with hooks is going to kill you. There's so many interactions where AJ Cook or the cop character is trying to convey the rules and trying to give everybody leadership, and it feels corny. The way that it's executed feels corny. It feels expositional. And there's no question why a lot of the other characters realistically are so skeptical of it, because they just sound whacked when they're trying to say it. This movie also carries on the issue that I had in the first film, which are all the additional premonitions throughout the film, which I just find to be a little bit lazy. Especially in this one, where you have the moment with a much more organic usage of this type of element, where they have the shadow with the man with the hooks, where the stoner character goes into the closet, a bunch of shit falls down, he falls backwards, and there's a light that's swinging behind a little statue guy from atop of a trophy and a bunch of coat hangers, and it casts a shadow on the ground of a man carrying hooks, which is an omen for how the next person is going to die. Why they didn't have more of that throughout this movie, I don't know, but that is the type of thing that I really like, finding a creative way to give us an omen besides just having the main character go, "Oh, I see water." But the biggest issue that I have with this film is, again, carried over from the first film, and that's the way that they execute the climax, the third act of this film. This one did not have the excuse and the get-out-of-jail-free card for me of having a reshot ending because of test screenings, at least not to my knowledge. This one tries to pull a little bit of a twist. It tries to pull a little bit of a switcheroo, and I've always found it to be incredibly stupid. You have this whole element throughout the entire back half of the film where Tony Todd's character tells AJ Cook and Ali Larder and the cop, like, only new life can defeat death. And they're like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And then she realizes that one of the people in her premonition was pregnant. And she goes, oh, that's it. If she gives birth to a baby that wasn't supposed to exist in the original timeline, it's going to wipe everything clean and we can escape death's curse. And that is a really interesting thing to do to expand the lore. But do they commit to that? No, they don't. They get all the way to the point where the baby is born, and then suddenly she gets like the most out of nowhere convenient fucking premonition where it's like, oh shit. Sorry guys. Yeah, the pregnant chick was never supposed to die in the first place. Sorry I didn't remember that, but this is information that's coming to me right fucking now. So, yeah, what next?
Things that could have been brought to my attention yesterday!
And then their explanation for new life ends up being that the main character has to die and then be resuscitated. And that is going to, jar death's curse, which, just like Alex surviving in the first film, is absolute bullshit in the rules of this universe. Like, if she's on death's list, if death is coming for her, then just like every other death, when she goes into the fucking water in that van, the locks would have automatically went down, the windows would not have opened, like all the stuff that happens where death prevents anybody from changing this or intervening would have happened. So just having her go and have her heart stop in the water and then have Dr. Klargian come up and resuscitate her, and that gives us a new slate. I thought that was such a bullshit way to end this film and makes no sense within the rules of this franchise and is a significantly weaker explanation of the new life cheat than having the woman actually deliver her baby. So I just wish they found a way to make that third act work a little bit differently, actually have the baby be the lifesaver and just make them trying to save the pregnant mom be a little bit more of an intense thing in the third act. It's kind of saved and softened by the final kill of the movie, which is a really good laugh out loud moment, the grill exploding. Yeah, another movie where it feels like they just could not figure out a way to, no pun intended, land the plane. Overall, guys, I still really enjoy Final Destination 2. It's not quite as amazing as I remember it being. It doesn't have quite the horror classic status that I used to hold it to, but it's still a really enjoyable movie in this franchise that I think is pretty close to the quality of the first film, certain things being done better, but still having a lot of the same issues with the first film, and buckle up because we're going to have even more as we go throughout the rest of this franchise. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. I'm also going to put the playlist up here of all of my Final Destination reviews and rankings, which of watching this video on release day, there will be 2. Watching it in the future, there'll be a whole franchise full of videos in there. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss all the rest of these review series and rankings. And as always, guys, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.